Well, we're going to dive in and start with our first story.
Yep.
Out of UCSD, which is a biosynthesis story.
Yes.
About mass producing what octopi or octopus use for camouflage. And this was out of Nature Biotechnology.
Yeah.
A lot of people love talking about like octopi are super intelligent.
Yes.
And everyone's like, oh, there's like an alien intelligence in the ocean.
Yeah.
And this is I think been something we've known about, but have just now made this next step of like, how can we replicate? So let's talk about this
Exactly.
story.
Yeah. The idea is that we want to mass produce something called xanthommatin. Okay. It's nature's master of disguise. It's a pigment that is responsible for cephalopod camouflage. Okay, cephalopods are your octopus, squid, cuttlefish. There you've got a photo. I can't see the octopus. The octopus are incredible at camouflage.
Oh, there's an octopus in that photo?
Yeah, in that red circle, there's an octopus in there.
That's incredible.
Yeah, but it's not only matched the texture, but the exact color characteristics of the coral reef or the ocean floor that's behind it.
Yeah.
And it's honestly like defying any reason how good it is.
Right.
The same pigment is also found in the coloration of butterflies and dragonflies, in the eyes of flies. So it's a ubiquitous biopigment. It's got a really high value because it's optoelectric, which means it can change its color with a response to electrochemical potential. So that's how the octopus can sometimes become super vibrant, and then also at the same time become this, they look like a rock, right? They can be like pulsing with like strobe lights, and at the same time do all of these other things. If we can replicate this biosynthesis,
right,
then we can go to next generation electronics like electrochromic displays. The main thing that's nice about this is it's biocompatible. So, I mean, one thing that I was thinking was like, what if you had like color changing tattoos?
Yeah.
Where like if you flex, then like it like just changes its, like it's like Avatar, dude.
It is like Avatar.
Yeah.
That's a great reference.
So it would be really cool, right, if we could make a bunch of this.
So when you say it's biocompatible, it means that it could interact with our as biological beings, our system directly.
Yeah, and it's not like toxic. Right?
Got it.
Because it's already a sort of organic compound.
That makes sense.
The other things, like it could be used in cosmetics if you have like multifunctional ingredients, or like health and skincare. It's very UV protectant, these coatings. So if we can mass produce a lot of it, that would be really helpful for all sorts of industries. The bottleneck is a supply challenge, okay? You can't just go into biology and try to extract it. Like, how many butterflies are you going to kill, right? Or like octopus. It's just not, it's low yielding, it's labor intensive, and it's not ethical, right?
It's not like mining.
Yes.
Which you could argue is also not ethical.
Exactly.
For different reasons.
Exactly. So this breakthrough here reports the first successful industrial gram scale biosynthesis. Okay.
Understood. Got it. Yep.
And the way that they did this scaling and this production is actually what I think the story is about, the real science is about, because the way that they produce this is kind of a plug and play type pathway that you could use to then manufacture other challenging biochemicals.
The analogy that this makes me think of is kind of like how CRISPR, like, was a platform, for lack of a better term, that had multiple use cases or functions that you could use it with. And so there's a kind of a similar platform level discovery happening here.
Yes.
Where it's not specific to just this
particular... This is kind of like a... Yeah, exactly. This is kind of like a proof of concept that it can be done, but the way that they did it is what I think is like really, really cool. Okay, because here's the core challenge, okay? Whenever you want to install... The xanthommatin comes from some genomic pathway, right? There's some biochemical pathway in the octopus that creates xanthommatin, okay? The standard approach is to take that gene, or take that bunch of genes that all contribute to this, stick that into a bacteria, and then have the bacteria produce it, right?
Yep.
You install a foreign gene, and that's what you do.
Got it.
The problem is there's a metabolic burden, okay? Because if you've got this new pathway that's taking up a lot of energy, it's taking up a lot of the ATP, a lot of the carbon atoms even, and it confers no survival advantage, the bacteria doesn't want to do it, right? And
kind of sounds a little bit like the AI thing happening right now.
Yeah, like exactly. You can actually, in terms of AI, you can use an analogy where it's like, all of the energy budget and the carbon budget of an organism is very strict. Okay, it's had billions of years of evolution to figure out this carbon atom has to go there, this carbon atom has to go there, this amount of ATP needs to be used for this, and so on and so forth, right? It's had billions of years of evolution to figure that out. And now all of a sudden you install on this electrical grid like a giant server farm, right? With no advantage. The bacteria is not going to reroute all of its electricity, all of its energy to make this server farm when it makes no sense, right?
Right.
In fact, if you have a bacterial population, you've got an evolutionary conflict because let's say a bunch of these bacteria are there. There's some mutation that cuts off supply to that server farm. That bacteria is going to grow faster because it's not wasting all that energy.
Right.
And then in a population, it's kind of like antibiotic resistance, where you've got a population that sort of there's some bacteria that use up the resistance and actually are resistant to the antibiotic, and some that aren't, right? And those are the ones that are going to go ahead. But in this case, it's like those that have budgeted well and have cut off this useless server farm are going to grow faster, and then they're going to dominate the entire population.
Right, that makes total sense.
Right?
Yep.
So that's the problem. Is like we're going against evolution. We're trying to engineer something, but there's all these cheaters around that are just going to do what they want to do.
Because we're trying to use literal biology as the platform by which we generate this organic compound.
Yeah.
Like we're not using machines and a factory.
Yeah.
We're literally using biology.
Yeah.
And there are these inherent properties underlying the evolutionary process of biology that are preventative factors from just being like maximize the output we care about.
Yeah.
Because it's not purely the system is not purely controlled by like human engineering input.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So we need to figure out a way to make the bacteria do what we want to do.
Right.
Okay. And run this server farm that like gives us xanthommatin and like makes us have this octopus superpower. Right. And the strategy that they're using is this plug and play strategy. It came out in Nature Biotech, growth coupled biosynthesis. That's what they're calling it. Okay. What they're doing is actually quite a simple thing. They're creating a fitness advantage. They're creating an evolutionary advantage for those that are using the server farm. And what they're doing is they've created what's called an auxotroph. It's an organism that has, through some kind of mutation, lost the ability to synthesize some essential ingredient. Okay? And the only way it can get this essential ingredient is if it runs the server farm. It runs this biomechanical pathway that we've installed that gives it that ingredient to let it grow.
That's incredible. So
it's like if bacteria had ethics, this would be very problematic.
Very unethical.
Okay? Yeah. And I'm sure there's people out there that are making that argument. And I mean, I don't have good arguments about that. Okay, that's not my field.
That's not the scope of this episode. The ethics of auxotrophs.
Yeah, but it's pretty insane. Like it's called synthetic auxotrophy. Okay, so the idea is you have a pathway, right? And on the bottom you've got your central pathway that grows the cell, that does metabolism and all that other stuff. And usually the input comes in. The input comes in from this side, and then it can fork into two paths. You've got, let's say, a bunch of carbon atoms. The carbon atoms can go to make more bacteria, or it can go to do this xanthommatin production, this engineered production. If you've got a choice, the bacteria is going to always pick grow myself. Right? Evolution dictates that. But if it doesn't have a choice, it has to go through the server farm in order to get the carbon to grow itself. Then actually those that are better at doing that artificial pathway are going to have an evolutionary advantage. We've actually used evolution to our advantage now by creating a foreign xanthommatin production pathway that puts out a byproduct that it needs.
This is interesting. We've hijacked our understanding of evolution to know that we need to create basically a need for the system to go down the path we want it to in order for it to be more evolutionarily advantaged against others, and that it's a little bit it's Interesting.
It's interesting, dude. At least it's bacteria, man.
At least let's hope they don't scale it up to larger eukaryotes.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway,
yeah. So they're using this bacteria called Pseudomonas putida. It's a soil bacterium. Mm-hmm. It's got a robust chassis that has a lot of metabolic versatility, meaning that it can like eat a bunch of different things. It's not like, there's not one pathway that it can go through.
It's not vegan.
Yeah. Even though it's like mostly glucose, it can like eat glucose in multiple different ways. Okay. And good natural tolerance to substrates and products, like anything that's coming out of that factory that we just installed.
Yes.
It's got a good tolerance for all sorts of stuff. They're using this soil bacterium. And what they're doing is they're taking a molecule as hostage. It's the 510 MTHF. It's basically a C1 carrier. It's a carbon carrier for DNA and RNA and for proteins. It can't make methionine without this thing, and it can't make the A and the G that's in our DNA. Okay? So without this pathway, it can no longer grow because it can't make DNA and it can't make proteins.
We're creating almost this like artificial famine at the cell level.
Exactly.
And requiring it to go through this pathway that will generate an output we care about in order to be able to literally feed itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And then comes the production line. So now how does it actually make the food that it needs, right?
Right.
What we do is we put a bunch of genes on a plasmid. A plasmid is a circular bit of DNA that we can use to change what the bacteria is producing. It's just foreign DNA that we can like plug in. Now these bacteria are already stressed out because they can't eat, so they're just trying to take in whatever help they can. We put in this plasmid that has genes on the plasmid to create this artificial pathway.
Yes.
Okay, where on its way to creating xanthommatin, what it's going to do is create formate, which is a precursor for tryptophan and all of the other things that the bacteria needs. Right. And the ultimate goal is you've got like a sole carbon source, which is through the factory.
Yeah. You have to pay the cost to be the boss. You have to go kiss the ring to survive.
Yeah. And even then it wasn't so simple, okay? Because you have that single carbon source, but the bacteria the initial bug was it still needed supplemental glycine and L-tryptophan, which is two kind of expensive ingredients that you need to give the bacteria in order to survive. You can't just give it glucose. So then what they did was they had another evolutionary lab in their little lab, okay? What you do is you say, okay, I need you to make glycine, right? I'm going to give you a bunch of glycine at first, and I'm going to slowly wean off your entire population of glycine. And you're hoping that the bacteria just learn through some mutations because of this pressure.
Yes.
They're going to learn how to make their own glycine. Either learn how to make their own glycine or live without it. Okay? And that's exactly what ended up happening. The bacteria had a single amino acid change in the METK gene, and then all of a sudden, they didn't need glycine, supplemental glycine.
You were sort of basically through this providing a withdrawal mechanism, driving evolutionary progress to basically fulfill the gap of the withdrawal of providing it directly to. Interesting. And it worked.
And it worked, right? What's cool about this is like this entire pathway, right? You've got the factory that's going in.
Yes.
The factory that they're using, that they've put in through this plasmid, through this foreign DNA, the stuff that they got from the octopus and whatever, that can't just be the native factory because it has to have a byproduct that encourages the bacteria to actually work, right? So it has to be leaky in some sense.
I understand what you're saying,
Not all of the carbon can go into the xanthommatin production.
It's not 100%
Some of it has
efficient.
to go out. Some of it has to go out in order to create formate and then become this like sole carbon source.
Yep, that makes sense. So the factory has sort of two functions, both creating what we care about and also providing enough for the cell to continue to propagate.
Yeah. And then those that ran the factory more actually had an advantage because they're the ones that could actually grow.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
That's crazy.
It's really crazy. And one of the ways that they actually showed that this was happening is an old school technique where you take an isotope of an atom. In this case, instead of carbon 12, they used carbon 13.
Okay.
And they fed it glucose with carbon 13 in a specific part of the glucose molecule, second from left or whatever. And you can trace, because this carbon is a 13 instead of a 12, it's a little bit heavier.
Yeah, okay.
So you can trace how this carbon 13 goes through that entire chemical pathway, right? Because some of those molecules are going to be a little bit heavier than the other ones.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
Because it's got one extra neutron.
Yes.
And what you can show is atom by atom, the carbon traveled along this xanthommatin pathway. So through the factory, you can see, okay, now it's on the floor. Now it's there. Now it's getting this, you know?
There's an indicator that allows us to see the through line of the entire process to know that we're actually routing through the factory.
Yeah. And you can confirm that this is what's happening, right? There's nothing else that's weird. And then finally, you get this optimized E. Puma xanthommatin strain that in 72 hours, you get a bunch of your pigment, 1,000 times more than what you were getting earlier for a lot less work. I mean, obviously a lot of work into doing this, but now that you can do it,
created the system.
2.4 grams per liter of xanthommatin powder. So this is, it's not only going to transform, let's say, the camouflage and the cosmetics.
Yes.
But I think what to me, what really struck was the way in which they did this, right? This biosynthetic hijacking of the metabolism.
Right. We now have sort of this plug and play platform. Again, I don't mean to bring up the CRISPR analogy again, but it's similar in the sense that other research teams are going to be able to take the insight from how you can basically facilitate biosynthesis by this sort of like this pathway that advantages those that go through the factory that produce what you want it to. And you can apply that to any number of other of biosynthetic outputs that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And like that's
the key insight for me.
Obviously.
Yeah, I think and you can accelerate production of antibiotics, plant alkaloids, polyketides, all sorts of
that's fascinating.
Biochemical things, and you can make the factory itself be different, right? Because all you need is something that releases a C1 molecule. It's a molecule with a single carbon, so it can be the formate pathway, the formaldehyde pathway. Who knows? Even like CO2, you could hijack respiration itself in the mitochondria, right? It just leads to. I mean, that's probably a lot harder because there's so many more steps. But
knowing that there's a stage 1 entry point to utilizing this as a methodology for biosynthesis means that there are any number of other use cases that with some amount of additional research are going to be unlocks. I mean, this is actually really
cool. I thought it was really cool.
Really fascinating. So we're going to be able to have makeup that's color changing. We're going to be able to have all your vehicle is going to be laced with this octopi camouflage. So if you're driving at night and you want to go night mode,
you can have a plant-based display. I don't know, like all sorts of stuff, dude.
That's actually okay. So this is out of UCSD.
Yeah,
they've now sort of created a platform for mass producing Octopus Camouflage, but it is a platform that can now be extrapolated into other arenas.
Yeah,
this is a paper out of Nature Biotechnology. That's a great story.
Yeah, that was cool. I thought that was really cool.
Fascinating story.